get myself on the spotlight. Hi, Carrie Cardinelli here with MEA. Welcome to this Fireside Chat. So excited in a moment to bring up Chip Conley and Stephanie Mehta to the stage. And first, I welcome all of you. So Chip popped in the chat that he's at the Rising Circle Ranch in Santa Fe. Pop in the chat, where are you in the world right now? Maybe you're traveling, maybe you're home, maybe you're at work. We normally have folks joining us from all over the world. Great. Let us know if this is your first time joining us for a live fireside chat. This is not a webinar. This is a real live in-person see each other meeting. So you'll get to enjoy a great conversation.
It's a therapy session. It's a therapy session. It's an hour of therapy, and Stephanie's going to help me with my life. And, you know, I don't know.
And we get to watch. It's like an Esther Perel. Where should we begin? Maybe that'll happen. Welcome, Chip. Good to see you.
I am
great to have you here. So Chip's going to be chatting with Stephanie for about half an hour or so, and then all of you get to ask some questions. I hear Nairobi Kenya's here. Good to see you too. Amazing. So keep that in mind as we go through this time, that you'll get to come up on stage to ask a question, which we prefer instead of trying to dig through the chat. So at the end of when we kind of have the discussion part, you'll have a chance to go into the reactions button to raise your hand and to come on up. Don't do it yet, but you will shortly. And we love doing these, Chip. They're just such a great opportunity to feature amazing leaders in the world and thought leadership and share great ideas. I just love them.
Well, and last week, was it last week that we had Gloria Steinem? I think we had Gloria Steinem.
We did. That was crazy.
And we have Ellen Langer next week from Harvard, you know, just maybe the most esteemed academic on the topic of how do you shift your mindset on aging. And she was doing it way before Becca Levy at Yale, who was a big fan. We're a big fan of. So yeah, we are so honored that people like Stephanie and all these other folks have joined us for this tradition. And we really appreciate so many of you showing up almost every week. And that's, Carrie tells me, like, we're doing too many of these. It's a lot of work to put these on. So
you have a lot of friends, and you guys are very lucky. She was very generous with these friends. So let's bring Stephanie up on stage. I'm excited for this one. I mean, two powerhouse entrepreneurs here together. Stephanie is going to be teaching at our Santa Fe campus in September.
She's not teaching at our Santa Fe campus, but
that's Inc. Right.
Yeah.
Inc. is September 24th to 29th. So let's bring Stephanie up on stage here. We're so delighted to have you. You're not far from me. I'm in Connecticut, and so is Stephanie. And what an honor to have you here. Stephanie Mehta is the CEO and Chief Content Officer at Mansueto Ventures, publisher of Inc. and Fast Company. She was previously the editor-in-chief of Fast Company. She's also worked at Vanity Fair, Bloomberg Media, Fortune, the Wall Street Journal. And I know it's going to be a really fun and rich conversation. We often have no idea where things are going. You're probably going to fire questions off at each other. We love that. So I'm going to get my box of popcorn and head out, and I'll see everybody near the end. And thank you both so much.
Thank you, Carrie. We would not be here without you and your wonderful team, Connor and the rest of the crew who make this happen. So hello, Stephanie.
Hi, Chip. Thanks for having me.
All right, let's get started and just know, like, if you could. So, well, first of all, you said I could ask you anything. Oh my God. How old are you?
I am 54.
Oh, I did not know that. That is the exact average age of the people who come to MEA. So Carrie said you're going to be in Santa Fe with us, but you're not, but maybe you will be in the future. 54. So if you could go back 30 years, Stephanie, and look at your career and say, okay, did I take the right path? And what are some lessons I've had along the way? It's a big question. But tell us a little bit about the path that got you to becoming the CEO of Mansueto Ventures that publishes two of the best known business magazines out there.
Yeah. Well, first of all, thanks for the question, and thank you so much for having me. I mean, when I heard that your previous guest was Gloria Steinem, I immediately felt unworthy and incredibly humbled. So I took a somewhat circuitous path to becoming a media CEO. I spent more than 25 years of my career as a business journalist, and it was all I ever really wanted to do once I discovered journalism. I really, really loved asking questions, working on stories, packaging information. It was just, and when I was editor-in-chief of Fast Company, I just thought it was the greatest job in the world. Loved every minute of it. I was somebody that really loved school, and to me, journalism was sort of an extension of school. You got to get up every day and do research and write the equivalent of a paper, but you had the instant gratification of it sort of being in the newspaper the next day or online the next hour or in the magazine that week. Unlike academia, which always felt like it was a long and more drawn out process. So I really loved the energy and the adrenaline of journalism, coupled with the sort of intellectual pursuits and the fact that it was just kind of a curious person. And so it fed my curiosity. And then about 4 years into my stint as editor of Fast Company, a couple things started to happen. One, I did sort of feel like, boy, I've done this job for 4 years. It was starting to feel like I had mastered the art of the role, and that there were new mountains I wanted to climb. And the owner of our company is a gentleman named Joe Mansueto, a really famous entrepreneur. He started Morningstar, the financial information and services company. And he said to me, I really believe strongly in journalists as editors, journalists as executives. My predecessor in the role, Eric Schoenberg, came up as a journalist before he became a CEO. And so he said,
I just want to say MEA alum,
MEA alum, yes.
Yes.
I think he credits MEA with a lot of his holistic thinking, not just about the world, but about how he wants to kind of comport himself as a citizen of the world. And so he said, if you ever felt like you wanted to try something new, let's have a conversation. And so I was very fortunate. I was able to move into the CEO role. And for me, it has been, as I said, I'm somebody who loves school. I'm somebody that kind of is a lifelong student. And so for me, what's been so great about the last 2 years in the CEO role is that I am constantly learning. Like every day, I learn something new. I learn from my colleagues. I learn from the executives I get to interact with still on a day-to-day basis in my role as CEO. And I'm also chief content officer. So I still maintain a hand in writing and helping the newsrooms. So to your question, like, is this the path I would have seen myself on 30 years ago? No, but I don't have any regrets, because I really did. I feel like I accomplished everything I wanted to accomplish as a journalist. And I felt I had I feel like I'm uniquely well qualified to be the executive of this company, because our owner is so driven by content. He wants it to be a profitable, thriving organization, but he doesn't own us because he expects to make his, next fortune on media. He owns us because he really wants to support great business journalism.
So thank you. And what would you say in the last 4 years has been your biggest executive leadership lesson? I mean, what if our painful life lessons and the things we learn along the way are the raw material for our future wisdom, you're wiser today because of what lesson or two from a business perspective of media in the last 4 years?
I would say I am wiser for a couple of lessons. Certainly on the people management front, I think trying to strike the right balance of a culture that is we set, when I became CEO, I set out to make sure that we had a really inclusive and warm and inviting culture. And I think that we sought to do that, but as we have moved into more in office, moved into a more hybrid, because I became CEO and we were still a completely remote workplace. And as we have sought to do that, trying to balance inclusivity with people's individual desires for more flexibility in the way they want to work. I think I am now wiser in that I understand how complicated that is. I think when I started the job, I just thought, if you say the right things about inclusivity and you walk the walk, that would be enough. And I realize it's so much harder than that, because especially in a smaller organization where you do have the capability, and I believe the responsibility, to listen across teams, to listen to individual needs, to be inclusive in the biggest sense of the word, trying to marry the values of inclusivity with the values of individuality, which we value both. I think understanding the complexity of that is something that has been a journey for me. And I'm still trying to figure it out, to be sure.
And by the way, I hear a lot of compliments about you as a boss. So let's just be really honest here. People like working with you. So, but business media is going through a hard time. I mean, or not just business media, all media.
Yeah.
Give us just a frame for a moment from what you know about where traditional media or traditional business media has been and where it is today, because it feels like it's, in terms of traditional media, smaller than it used to be. Is that accurate?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a couple of things have happened, and I'll, the history of media in 30 seconds or less. I mean, when I started in the business in 1992, interestingly, there were actually not as many players as there are today, but they were really big and they were really important. And if you were a reader or an advertiser, you had to engage with that content. So it was the Wall Street Journal, it was Business Week, it was Fortune, it was Forbes, it was a little bit of the New York Times business page. And if you were international, it was the Financial Times. And there might be niche publications, there would be local city journals, like I grew up reading Crane's Chicago Business in Chicago. But for the most part, if you wanted to reach the most important executives in the world, you advertised in the Wall Street Journal. If you wanted to tell your story to the most important executives in the world, you would reach out to the beat reporter at the Wall Street Journal. And that was, and Business Week and Fortune, but it was a relatively small world, and it was a great audience. I mean, you wanted to reach these executives because they were high net worth individuals, they were decision makers, and by and large, people really weren't trying to slice and dice the audience that much. They just wanted to reach, people that they knew were important. The internet changed everything, and I would say, for the better. It really democratized business news, and it created a whole new group of business publications, one of which was Fast Company. I mean, I don't think Fast Company would have existed were it not for the internet, not because it was an internet first publication, but because people wanted to understand how this new technology was affecting business. And Fast Company was one of the many publications that sort of rose up to try to address that need. But also what happened is it really fragmented the audience, and it fragmented the way people found your content, and that continued throughout the 90s and the 2000s. And then social media came along and sort of played a disintermediating role. More and more people weren't going to the fastcompany.com or the inc.com homepage. They were getting their news via a social post or via a share from somebody. And that trend has only continued. And so it's made it harder and harder for us to find audiences. Now you layer on TikTok and Instagram and Reels, and you have a whole generation. And I'm not in any way critical of this, but the first source of news for them in the mornings is often TikTok or a reel or a piece of social media. And to be perfectly honest, it's really hard for our business because one, the stories we tell aren't necessarily easily digestible in social form. We're trying, but we're still learning that craft. But the other thing is that we can't monetize that content. So I can invest a lot of time and energy in creating something for TikTok, but I can't make money on that right now. And so that's a real tension for us and for all of media.
Yeah, I can only imagine. Well, thank you for putting out a great product. I mean, I think the key thing to know is like, gosh, if the product is not great, with the odds stacked against you in all kinds of other ways, you won't be able to sustain the business. Tell us a little bit about Inc. versus Fast Company in terms of who's the reader, who does it tend to who tends to gravitate toward it? By the way, here, for those who don't know it, Alan Weber, who's the mayor here in Santa Fe, is one of the co-founders of Fast Company. And we are talking with him right now about potentially co-leading a workshop next year at the Santa Fe campus, which would be great. So yes, what's the difference between Inc. and Fast Company?
Yeah, I like to think of our two publications as sort of covering the continuum of business. So Inc. exists to empower and inspire the American founder and entrepreneur. And that could be the solopreneur or the young person who's got a side hustle that he or she or they intend to eventually grow into a business. And kind of you go from that all the way to the Inc. 5000 honoree. Again, all privately held companies or founder-led companies, but the Inc. 5000 are the fastest growing companies in the United States. And then I think Fast Company kind of picks up somewhere in that continuum for Inc. It could be fast growth companies. They may not even necessarily be the fastest growth companies in the world, but they are venture backed or bootstrapped, but growing really quickly. They are sort of in the world of tech and innovation. And so, Fast Company covers innovation, and it could exist in that sort of small to medium-sized fast growth company, all the way up to, Fast Company is named Microsoft and NVIDIA and Apple as most innovative companies, and the CEOs of those companies have appeared on our covers. So we kind of cover everyone from the solopreneur and the side hustle individual at Inc. all the way through the Inc. 5000 company, and then Fast Company covers a lot of small, fast growth innovators all the way up to the biggest companies in the world.
So, there's really a clear difference between the two, although some people subscribe to both. And I am fortunate enough to be a columnist for Inc. And have been doing that for about a year now. And I think Sarah, my editor, is on this call. I saw her name there earlier. Sarah, thank you for being my editor. Yeah, I have personally found it to be enlightening. Also, for 3 years now, we've been doing an Inc. Masters private week at our Baja campus with some of the Inc. 5000 members who are part of your Masters community. And that's amazing. And then we have this upcoming workshop in Santa Fe later in September that I'm going to be co-leading with a woman named Mackie McKay, who has been part of all 3 Inc. Masters events, and it has a really wise mind, and she's a good Kentucky girl. So she's got a really sort of heart of America kind of spirit about her, and has a CFO's brain. First of all, I just want to say thank you, Stephanie, for the variety of ways that we collaborate together. Any of your thoughts you have on what it means to be an entrepreneur today, and and maybe the value of why Inc. continues to do this Inc. Masters private week each week, and now why we're doing an Inc. workshop with me leading it.
Yeah, well, first of all, and thank you, Chip, for the columns that you do. And Sarah Dieter is on, as Chip mentioned, and she's an amazing talent as an editor, and we're really lucky to have her. I want to put Chip's column into a little bit of context for Inc., and I think that might help set the stage for why we're so excited about the Entrepreneurship at Any Age workshop at MEA. Inc. is a unique title in that it is for founders. It again exists to inspire and inform entrepreneurs and founders. And what we've discovered is that entrepreneurs, and I say this with the greatest affection, and this pun is intentional, they have a chip on their shoulder. They want very often to hear directly from founders. There are times, of course, where you need a journalist and an editor like Sarah to provide a little bit of an intermediary. But what we've found with our magazine, with our website, and at our conferences and our live events is that our readers, our communities respond really strongly to hearing advice, guidance, war stories from other founders. And so that's what makes Chip's column, one of the things that makes Chip's column so powerful is that he is talking about the issues that founders face directly from his own experiences as a founder. And I think when you transfer that to entrepreneurship at any age, it's going to marry the modern elder academy curriculum and wisdom and all of the great work you do holistically. But it's being delivered by Chip and Mackie, who have really walked a mile in the shoes of founders. And from my experience, that is what they find most powerful. Yes, they like the content. Yes, they like the community, but the credibility that they assign to people like Chip is greater than that they would assign to, a professor or somebody that has done a lot of academic and theoretical research. The content may be just as powerful, but the fact that it's being delivered by Chip and by someone who has really understood the entrepreneurial journey, I think that is what makes the column, that's what makes the workshops so incredibly powerful to our readers.
What's going to be fun about this particular group, it's September 24th to 29th. I think Connor put a link in the chat, is there'll be a mastermind group for free afterwards, meaning that group of people is going to continue to actually be collaborating with each other and helping, entrepreneurs, whether you're a solopreneur or you have a bigger company, to actually get better at what they do and get wiser at what they do in the workplace. So I hope some of you, if doesn't fit your profile, certainly tell your friends, because it's also the best time of year to be in Santa Fe. Oh my gosh, late September and October and early November is one of the best times to be here, because the leaves are changing on the cottonwood trees and it's a little cooler, and you can just sort of, I don't know, there's something about that time of year. So before we go to audience questions, and so for those of you and some of you have already put questions in the chat, but if you don't mind, raise your hand and we'll actually call on you and let you ask the question directly. But Stephanie, my last question to you is, so in all of your years of business journalism, who are the leaders, and they could be business leaders we've never heard of, that you most admire, and why?
Yeah, well, no conversation about business leaders that one admires can be had without talking about Yvon Chouinard, the founder of Patagonia. What I admire about Yvon, and there are many things to admire about him, his commitment to saving the planet, the way that he has tried to build sustainability into every aspect of Patagonia's business, and the way that ethos has continued long after he's ceased to be the day-to-day operator of the company. But about 2 years ago, he created this really innovative plan for succession. He was 100% owner of Patagonia, and realized that after he was gone, he couldn't guarantee that the new ownership of Patagonia, whether that was an ESOP, he passed it on to his employees, or whether a private group came and took it over, would continue to aspire to his values. So he created essentially a private trust that would own all of the shares. And I just think that his commitment to the longevity of Patagonia, the long-term thinking around Patagonia's values, and the fact that he was innovative in the way he went about it, to me, makes him incredibly worthy of admiration.
Beautiful. Yeah, listen, We talk about him a lot at MEA, and he's a bit of a beacon in the business world. Any other ones?
I'll talk about someone who's near and dear to your heart, Chip, and that's Brian Chesky. I think that and I wrote my first Modern CEO column actually about Brian because there are not a lot of people who come from a pure creative background who become the CEO of a publicly traded company. I mean, I consider myself a creative who became a CEO, but I run a small private business. And there's certainly lots of examples of creatives who run smaller organizations. But for Brian, Rhode Island School of Design graduate, somebody who thinks of himself very much as a designer. I think you can speak to this better than I can, but I think he thinks of himself as a designer before he thinks of himself as an executive.
Yep.
And for him to navigate not only entrepreneurship, but now public company leadership, and to have not lost his focus on creativity and his commitment to creativity. And he talks about it all the time. And he spoke at a Fast Company event where he said, we need more creatives in the C-suite. We need more creative people on boards. I really admire his consistency and his commitment to making sure that we don't ever lose sight of the importance of creativity and design in business.
Yeah, let me, while we're waiting for some questions, we do have some questions in the chat, but I highly recommend you raise your hand and I can call on you that way too, because what tends to happen, as many of you know, is we end up not being able to call on everybody because over time we get more hands coming up. So feel free to raise your hand, Susie. Go down to the bottom and where you see where it says, where is it? Where is that?
It's React, I think.
Is it under React?
Under React, there's a caret, and then you can raise your hand.
Okay. Yeah. So you raise hand. Perfect. Exactly.
I'm hopping in. Some of you guys are figuring this out. Down at the bottom, you have to put your mouse on the screen. You'll see the little heart that says React. Click that. Perfect. Then it says raise your hand. Some of you guys are already hopping in, and don't put your hand down thinking I'll remember, because I won't. So just keep your hand up and we'll get to as many of you as we can.
So, Brian Chesky, I'll say one thing and then we'll go to some questions. So for those who don't know my story, I joined Airbnb 12 years ago as what they ultimately called the modern elder there, which I didn't love at first, until Brian and his co-founders said, Chip, a modern elder is someone who's as curious as they are wise. And when I heard that, I was like, ooh, the alchemy of curiosity and wisdom, that sounds pretty interesting. And so I totally agree with you. I would not have joined that company at a time when almost no one had heard of Airbnb if I didn't see the talent in Brian and a voracious appetite for learning. And so I will just say, as someone who had been running my own company for 24 years, sold it, had a 2-year midlife atrium where I got to sort of be curious and had some spaciousness in my life. And then to join Airbnb and be on the treadmill 70 hours a week. And now I'm mentoring Brian in leadership while also reporting to him. That was a crazy time because, to be running your own company and then joining a startup in the technology world that I had no background in at age 52, twice the age of the average person there, and to be mentoring Brian as the CEO who didn't have a business background, and to have a good relationship there where the world was looking at us and saying, oh, they're grooming Chip to be CEO. And Brian could have felt very territorial about that. But instead, I was reporting to my mentee, Brian. And it took a certain amount of just beautiful, symbiotic appreciation for each other, because I had something to teach Brian and he had a lot to teach me as well. Yeah. So thank you for that suggestion or that recommendation. Let's go to Michael Martin in Dallas, one of our MEA alums.
Hey there, everybody. Thanks, Chip. And Stephanie, this is awesome. Thanks for what you're sharing. I'm in the regeneration, sustainability, climate, clean energy world. So my question, you speak about Yvonne Chouinard, yes. Brian Chesney, yes. Leaders you admire. What about those that are leading in this area? Pick your word: climate, environmentalism, sustainability, in a really meaningful, deep way, not greenwashing, because I'm real familiar with that. I'd love to know your perspectives on that, because you probably know a bunch of stuff I don't know, and I'd love to hear it. Thank you.
A great question. And I will, I'm going to find it and I'm going to drop it in the chat. A couple of years ago, Fast Company dedicated the first, it does its Most Innovative Companies issue. And I think this was the 2022 Most Innovative Companies edition. And the first 10 companies were all in the climate space, in one form or another. And a couple of the names that stand out for me, I think there's a young founder named Donnell Baird who runs a company out of New York that is basically trying to work with cities and landlords in inner cities to try to bring solar panels and to change out the heating systems. A lot of them have very antiquated old boilers in the basements, and he's trying to use a mix of financing. He got a line of credit and I think a financing instrument from Goldman Sachs, as well as incentives from cities like Ithaca, New York, to basically say, like, being green doesn't just have to be for suburban white people. Like, there is a way to green our cities as well. And so I think some of the work he's doing there is super authentic. And he's going into the communities. He's not just sort of expecting that his salespeople will be the ones that will make the pitch work. He's working with community groups, he's working with cities, he's working with finance organizations, and he's trying to make it so that, you can get either landlords or homeowners to put on, to adopt solar panels and to basically change out their heating for much more energy efficient and greener systems. So he's somebody I really admire, but I'm going to find that link and I'm going to drop it in the chat and share it with Chip and his friends.
Do you remember what the name of the company is?
Oh boy, I want to say it's Block Power, BLOC, Block Power.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think I've heard about them.
Very
Thanks, Stephanie. That's great. Appreciate
Very
that
good.
info. So
Sembe, what time is it in Japan right now?
2:30.
2:30 in the morning.
Yes.
You are so committed as an alum. Thank you. It's always great to see you here.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you, Stephanie and Chip. I enjoyed this book, a Japanese version of First Company.
Oh.
Thank you. I have one at my desk at work too. Thank you for your support.
There are many impact cases in this book, and one of the case impactful is New York City, the made. And I live in Japan, so I have no idea how much changed the New York City. And I felt the communication is between people in New York City must have improved a lot. So this book taught me the impactful of constantly change to or trying to new things for creatively life. And what other cases do you recommend for me?
I think that we are seeing really interesting things happening in some of the smaller cities in the United States. And I confess, both Fast Company and Inc. are a little bit US centric. So, I want to give a little bit more thought to examples from outside the United States. But it's interesting. I just mentioned Ithaca, New York, which is which is where Cornell University is. They are doing really interesting things as a city around a number of things. I think, don't quote me on this, but I think they are looking at, for example, universal basic income as a potential option for dealing with income inequality. They are working with this company, Block Power, to try to bring solar panels and green technology into underserved neighborhoods. And I think that there are a lot of smaller cities, because of their size, that have the ability to be a little bit more creative and to try to do interesting things. What a lot of cities, I think, have discovered is that intersection, and I'm now thinking back to some of Michael's questions. I mean, we have clearly this massive climate crisis, which is affecting health, which is affecting, which is putting putting real pressure on cities and urban communities. And we look at cities, and so many of them don't have enough shade. They don't have enough greenery. And if we could green our cities, that might be able to help us a little bit with some of the health issues which are caused by climate. So I'm really curious about the ways that everybody sort of how these issues are all intertwined. There's a lot of intersectionality when we think about some of the issues that that affect design, cities, climate.
Beautiful.
Yep. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sembe. Thanks for being up in the middle of the night. Yele, is that how you pronounce it? Yele?
You got it right. How are you?
Very good. Good to see you here.
Great. Stephanie, nice to meet you and congratulations on your work.
Thank you.
I'm a physician, a cardiologist. About 12 years ago, I went to business school, got an MBA, and 2 years after that, I joined Ernst & Young, where I am now. So I'm a management consultant, chief medical officer at EY. My father was an author, and he got us writing when we learned how to write. So I've written for a long time. I do a lot of LinkedIn posts, probably twice a week consistently for the past 5 years. And I was looking at some of my previous posts, and then a thought occurred to me, would it be of any value to a readership if I called all my LinkedIn posts and aggregated them into thematic buckets like artificial intelligence, health equity, and publish a book? What are your thoughts around that?
Book publishing is tough. I mean, I think someone gave me a statistic the other day that only 4% of books published in the United States sell more than 10,000 copies, which is, now that said, I think for most people, myself included, and the previous questioner held up a book that I worked on. If it's a labor of love, and if you're doing it because you want to share your wisdom and be able to organize your thoughts in a meaningful way, I think it's great. It's something that you can share with your clients. It's something that you can share with prospective clients, and it's certainly something that I think your coworkers would value, along with people if you are trying to sort of build standing in a community. It's great. I would also I would consider an ebook. I mean, digital publishing is gives you much more control, and you can do it much more quickly. So I would, and if you want to drop your contact information in a private chat to me, I'd be happy to share some ideas with you.
Perfect. I'll do that. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thank you, my friend. Susie. Susie, we cannot hear you.
Hello.
There you go.
I have a similar question. I have a lot of content from decades of having a very amazing couple of URLs in the early internet days. I ran a company for about 25 years, and I am looking at that too. I hate social media. I don't want to do that. So there's this, I could probably hire somebody to do that, but I'm looking at ways to organize and disseminate that content. Ebooks, maybe, but more educational pieces that I can put together and put on a platform. So, because at my age, I am certainly not, I don't have any degrees. I'm not going to be hired by a company, and I'm a solo entrepreneur. I've always gone that direction. So some of those ideas would appeal to me also about how to go about organizing and monetizing a lot of content.
And while you're at this, Susie, I'm going to add on to that question. Do you have any thoughts on Substack, Stephanie?
Yeah, I was actually going to recommend Substack. Substack's a little controversial in the sense that, like many platforms, they've decided to take a little bit of a hands-off approach. They don't want there are a few authors on Substack that I would say there's not a lot of fact checking that necessarily happens on Substack, and certainly there are controversial opinions. But that said, I mean, I subscribe to a number of Substack authors. I find their content incredibly valuable. And Susie, there's a couple of ways you can do it. One, you can certainly use it just as a publishing platform. And you can upload all of your contacts, and it's just a way for you to basically create a newsletter for a private group. You don't have to be on social media. You don't have to be on LinkedIn. And then there is an option to monetize it. And so you can get your subscribers and your fans to be able to pay you for the newsletters. As I said, I know there are many authors, including Casey Newton, who's a tech writer I follow religiously, and if again, I don't think I'm misspeaking here. I think he ultimately made the decision to leave Substack because I think he was uncomfortable with their policies on content. But that said, it's an incredibly easy to use platform, and I think I certainly have continued to subscribe to a number of Substack authors.
Well, the interesting thing, thank you, for me is that it's sexuality. And I am looking at using AI for developing the visual aspects more of the writing, and it's detailed, and it's content I've never seen in other places. So I'm interested in that too. So I will certainly investigate Substack. I don't spend much time there, but I will. And then from there, I'm sure there's offshoots that I can move into for other kinds of content.
Yeah.
So, thank you very much.
Thank you for your question.
All right, let's go to Jenny.
Hello from San Francisco, and thank you so much for your time and for hosting this valuable conversation. My question has to do with how you manage fear when you are transitioning from something that you're comfortable with to something new. Like you said, you were a journalist going to CEO role. I find that it inevitably will creep in. I'm just curious how you manage that.
Yeah, I mean, I'd be curious to hear Chip's answer to that question. I mean, for me, it was, and maybe this is just how I'm wired, and maybe it's a function of my editorial training. I just I prepared for everything as best I could. I just tried to talk to a lot of people, listen to a lot of people. I found it was easier to ask questions and listen and take notes. And so I approached the new role and my new set of responsibilities and any sort of uncertainty I had by just treating it like I would treat a research project or a story. And so I would go out and I think I spent my first 4 to 5 weeks on the job just in back to back meetings and conversations, and really just tried to listen and understand and figure out and to learn what I didn't know. Because I feel like knowledge is the thing that I've always used to help it never combats fear, but it helps sort of ameliorate the fear. And so when I had an absence of knowledge, I sought to fill it in by talking to people who knew better than I did.
And I would add a couple things. Number one is I wrote a book a few years ago called Emotional Equations. And one of the emotional equations in the book was anxiety equals uncertainty times powerlessness. And what that basically means is that the two primary ingredients that tend to create anxiety or fear are the things you don't know and the things you can't control. Uncertainty times powerlessness. So what I found in my life and in my career is when I'm most feeling anxious, I really need to get clear on what is it that I do know and what is it that I don't know. And in terms of the things I don't know, how might I learn about that, or how might I become knowledgeable about it? And then the second piece is powerlessness, which is what can I control and what can't I control? And sometimes putting it on paper, I call it the anxiety balance sheet. And if you do a Google search for Chip Conley anxiety balance sheet, you'll see some of my Wisdom Well daily blog posts around this topic. That it just getting it on paper or getting it on digital paper really helps to take away some of the free-floating nature that fear and anxiety can have. I would also say we have an online course MEA does that's really well suited for the question, and that's called it's our Navigating Transitions course, and it doesn't require you to come to our campuses, although our campuses are beautiful in Baja and Santa Fe. But it's an online course that addresses how do you navigate a transition and address some of the fear that comes from a transition.
Thank you. I'm calm just by the answer.
Oh, good.
Thanks
Let's
so
go to
much.
Carol. We're going to go to Carolyn because she dropped off and she's back on, and so she lost her place in line. And Don Spradlin, I'm gonna just push her right in front of you because you're a gentleman. Yes, Carolyn.
Okay, so I started reading Inc. magazine in like 1983 because I was a very advanced practice nurse, and healthcare had become a business, and I wanted to become a businesswoman, and I wanted to go to a top 10 school, which was extremely hard to do. And I also was getting divorced. I felt very at loose ends. So I just started reading the magazine because it was all about you can do it. And I got into Stanford, I got into Northwestern. I eventually went to Northwestern. And now I'm going to Chip's conference with the Inc. magazine in September. And I just feel like I have many more years to work. I'm really into the science of longevity and extending our careers and financing them. So I just think it's a great idea. And this is my fourth one. I'm a big follower of Chip, and met him first when he had his book about the modern elder. And he wrote in the front like, oh, maybe we'll do something together sometime. And then I just started going to the workshops. And anyway, I just think it's really wise to see that any age is possible. And now with wisdom, which AI can't replace, but I just have so much to offer in healthcare, biotech, of these old-fashioned values that I learned in my training, but using technology, but trying to really never lose caring about people. Florence Nightingale, Clara Barton, who started the Red Cross, in the 1850s, and just make sure that we use technology, but we still have the caring that is really what healthcare should all be about.
Beautiful.
So anyway, I'm very excited. I think it's great. You all just keep going. And I'm grateful to Inc. magazine because when you're trying to go straight up and do something really hard, it just helps to believe anything is possible.
Yep. Thank you. I'm looking
And I
forward
just want to thank Carolyn because she name checked Stanford, which is Chip's alma mater, and Northwestern, which is mine. And I'm glad to know she picked mine.
And that's where I went to nursing school. I went through a 5-year nursing program in the 70s with 18 girls. Then I went to Yale. Yeah. And so, I have a background that should be used.
Yep.
And I don't have any children, so I have the time to do it.
We love you, Carolyn. Honestly, it's great. I'm looking forward to seeing you in a few weeks. Dawn, let's go to you.
Thank you. Thanks, Chip. I'm looking forward to seeing you in Santa Fe on the 24th of September for the
you're coming. Oh, great.
I'm going to be there with Carolyn again. Carolyn, I've done a previous workshop. Yeah. Anyway, I wanted to ask a question about a new venture that I'm starting in the industry of selling fractional home shares. And the question is based on the fact that Picasso, which is the big elephant in the room, achieved unicorn status in very short time. And
explain what Picasso is.
Picasso is a company that provides co-ownership of second homes. And they are US based, and they had a PR announcement in January about how excited they are to start doing shares in Paris and London. So Peter Thiel put $13 million in a couple of guys' companies in 2021, I think, to create the second largest company in the industry, which is Ember. And so I'm starting a company called Joie de Vivre Homes. And thanks to Chip's blessing, And I'm excited. I'm very excited. I leave for France tomorrow to go look for homes. I'm going to focus on the south of France. So my question is, what's the dish about this industry? Because fractional ownership has been used for jets and yachts for a long time, and only recently, as in this decade, for homes, second homes primarily. So I'm curious what you know about the industry and what the dish is on the street for my new life.
Well, I think it's a question better directed at Chip. I actually don't know that much about the industry. My hunch is that just based on residential real estate overall, that a lot of the complexity is because of international laws around home ownership. That's
Sure.
my guess, that's been a gating factor. Chip, what are your thoughts?
Well, it's funny you asked the question, Don, because when you're here in Santa Fe, I'll talk to you about it. We have 2,600 acres, and at some point we are going to have some fractional ownership homes
Right.
on this ranch. It's definitely a lot better than timeshare. So for
Oh,
those
yeah.
who don't understand timeshare versus fractional, timeshare, you're sort of buying into a platform, and whereas in fractional ownership, you're actually buying into a particular home. And
Yeah.
you're like, okay, I have 1/13 share of a home. I get to go to that home 4 weeks a year. And I love Napa, I love Santa Fe, I love New York, I love wherever. And it's my way of feeling like not only do I get access to this home, but I get the upside of potentially some real estate increase in values. So I think it makes sense. I think the key on all of these kinds of things is trustworthiness of the sponsor. And so, because, when you get into these kinds of things, when you're sharing things, there's always the risk that it's not managed well. And therefore it gets, the home over time depreciates much faster than a normal home because people don't feel like they own it by themselves. But you and I'll talk more about it when I see you.
I can't wait. Thank
All
you.
right. Let's go to Mary.
Hey, Chip. Hi, Stephanie. Good
Hey,
to
Mary.
Thanks so much for doing this. I would love to know what we can learn from what you've learned from great leaders. Like what are some traits of great leaders? You cited Yvonne and Brian, and they're awesome. But like when you go home at night and think about like, wow, like that really sat with me. Like what are things we can learn that you've learned from them?
Yeah, I would say, and I've written a few pieces about this as well. And I know these are words that people toss around a lot, and don't necessarily give a lot of meat and meaning to them. But I think humility and authenticity are two themes that emerge a lot in the leaders that I talk to and the leaders I admire. And for me, the humility part comes back to, and I think this might just be like in my professional background, but that willingness to listen, the willingness to admit when you don't know something, and when you've made mistakes, to be willing to correct them. I think that leadership has evolved a lot. When I started covering business in the mid-90s, the covers of business magazines, they always featured people like Jack Welch and Scott McNeely. And I don't think Jack Welch probably had a humble bone in his body. I say that, and he was widely admired for not being humble. He was widely admired for being definitive and for always having the answers. I don't think organizations respond positively to that anymore. Organizations, big or small, they tend to appreciate leaders who roll up their sleeves, are willing to admit mistakes, and show a capability and a capacity to listen. So that's sort of my short answer. Yeah.
Go ahead. Finish up. You sure? Okay. Mary, I would just add to what Stephanie just said, which I totally agree with. I wrote a blog post yesterday on the MEA. You can find it on the MEA website, meawisdom.com, under the free resources with the wisdom well. And it was which is the better kind of leader, an either or leader or a both and leader. And I argue for the value of a both and leader in yesterday's blog post. So you might enjoy that. Let's do one last question. And that's going to be Steph Curry's sister. No, I'm kidding.
Cousin. No, long distance cousin.
Are you long distance cousin?
He doesn't know it, but yeah, distantly.
Okay, Cherie.
No, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Hi, Stephanie.
Hi, Cherie. Good to see you again.
Okay, yeah. I have been a business journalist for about as long as Stephanie has. And I have a question regarding just the state of journalism, because part of how I have seen it change, which more people who are business leaders, more people who are entrepreneurs are also doing the writing. We have this competition for everybody else out there, regardless of the platform, but also in magazines. What's kind of your take in terms of where the roles of traditional journalists are for content in printed publications and or on their websites versus the voices of business leaders?
To paraphrase Chip, it's yes and. I feel like, as I said earlier, for Inc. magazine readers in particular, that founder to founder conversation is really valuable, whether it's online or in the magazine or at our conferences. There's just something that's incredibly powerful about hearing a founder's story. And I'm thinking back to what Carolyn said about how Inc. just proved to her that she could do it. Like, it is sort of hearing from those founders in their own words about the challenges that they had to overcome, about the 10th door they knocked on before someone finally said, yes, I'm going to write you that check. All of that is just so much more inspirational than if I were saying it, because I'm the middleman. That all said, Inc. and Fast Company and other publications that do want to inspire, we also feel like it's important to write hard stories about individuals who have tried to innovate or tried to do social good, but have proven to be either untrustworthy or not good stewards of their investors' money or of their customers' goodwill. And those are the stories that founders are not going to tell on their own. Those are the stories where journalists need to step in and provide the research and the context and the fact checking and the detail. So I think there's a place for both. My hunch is that, as I said, the internet has democratized everything. And so there will always be places for, the Chip Conleys to be able to tell their stories and to have their blog posts and to reach their audiences. But Chip also needs Inc. to a certain extent, because there are many people who don't know to go to Chip's blog. And so by being a columnist for Inc., hopefully we are together expanding the universe of people who can read that content. And then once they read Chip, hopefully they come for Chip, but they'll stick around for, the Cherie Curry story or the Stephanie Mehta story or the Sarah Dieter story. That may be something that they'd not thought that they didn't wake up in the morning thinking they needed to read.
Beautiful. Great question. Great answer. Carrie, back to you.
Woo! That was a fast hour. Did you guys love that? Pop in the chat your biggest takeaway. Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you, Chip. That was an extraordinary conversation. You will get a recording of this, including access to the chat. So if there's a bunch of goodies in there that you're looking for, don't worry. You will get it. And again, thank you all so much for coming today. Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you, Chip. We'll put some music on and send you out of here.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Stephanie.
everybody.
Thanks, Chip. Thank you, Carrie.
Thank you, Carrie.